You're running a shop floor, not a Pinterest interest board or a fantasy football league. You don't need inspiration, you need things to work. So welcome to Build Your Way, a podcast from Cetec ERP. This is a show for manufacturers who are in it every day, from quoting and shipping jobs to troubleshooting quality and material shortages, all while staying a step ahead of what's next. We bring you stories from the field, lessons that stick, and strategies that actually scale to help you build better. Let's get to work.
Welcome back to the Cetec ERP Build Your Way podcast. My name is Taylor Wagon, and today I have with me
JP John Paul McDaris.
JP McDaris with Entrada Group, who has agreed to join us. By way of background, I was trying to explain how you and I met each other originally, and literally it's just because we sat next to each other at like a million trade shows.
Right.
The Milwaukee wire harness show, year after year, we ended up next to each other. That's actually how we got to know each other.
That's right. Well, and obviously the famous Albuquerque, the word Albuquerque.
So, a background there. I grew up in, Wisconsin through elementary school, and then moved to the wonderful city of Albuquerque, New Mexico for middle school, high school. And actually, you and I have had beer in Albuquerque, catching up in the old hood there. I'm in Austin now and have been for 28 years or whatever. And that's your old stomping grounds as well. So we cross over in a lot of places. So
that's right. We know the good places to go. I think that's what it is. Yeah.
All right. So we have a recurring bit here on the podcast where I start out with like a little book and I recommend a book to the crowd. It's real kind of a reading rainbow vibe. And the book I picked today is right here. It is The Making of the Atomic Bomb. I don't think I've done this book on the podcast yet. It is a favorite of myself. It is on that Silicon Valley canon. Everybody likes to read this. This is a book I didn't want to read, and it was recommended to me. And because I lived in Albuquerque, I'd already been to the museum, the bomb museum. Tons of people who work at the national labs. Like, my father-in-law worked at the national labs, and it just felt like old history. And I was like, man, I don't want to read a bomb book. I've already read a million bomb books, and this book is awesome. I finally read it, and I was like, wow, that was so good. I think this would make top 5 history books for me. It's that good. In terms of like them overcoming the difficulties, the engineering and science challenges, the whole story is just, it's fantastic. So great little book about making things. Anyway, here we are. Other things I just have to get off my chest on the day here. So I'm wearing kind of like flesh tones. I've got this pink Cetec shirt on, and I've got these vaguely kind of, they're linen pants, but they have a little bit of like a rose color to them, kind of an odd color. And I was pointed out to me this morning that they have a hole in the butt. And once somebody tells you that, your whole day is transformed.
It's very transparent.
Yeah, man. You walk around and something in the back of your head is like, man, I've got a hole in my butt right now.
I think I know how that goes. I have this habit of owning Levi's for about 9-10 years. And it's basically what eventually happens to all my pants, and they kind of blow out the back. And it's the hardest thing. I love old broken in Levi's, and it's the hardest thing trashing them and having to go buy a new pair for 3 times the cost because of inflation.
Shrinkflation.
And then break them in again. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is pretty fascinating. I don't know when the last time you bought a pair of Levi's. I remember, I was not born when they were massively produced in the United States. I would say growing up, the tag would read China. Yeah. But I've been amazed since COVID in the Levi's products that I bought, whether they're denim shirts or jeans, where they've been made. Now they say Philippines, they say Vietnam, they say Indonesia. Nicaragua has a big Dockers
No, I didn't know.
operation where they're sewing Dockers, cut and sew. And I mean, to me, that's when the first thing I do when I buy something, especially something like a pair of Levi's, I want to know where it's bought. And I don't know if you saw what they did to Levi's Stadium, but as marketing, as a marketing guy, I literally just wanted to make a pair of white labeled jeans that had the label washed out.
Yeah.
With just white draped over it.
That was great.
Or just a shirt that just had the outline with like something draped over the top.
Oh yeah, little cloth. Maybe you could just even sew on a little cloth flap to cover the logo. I think they did a great job there. All right, hey, so you're with the company you're with is Entrada Group.
Yes.
And this is obviously relevant as like where your Levi's are made, because Entrada Group gets to. I'm going to let you pitch yourself here. Entrada Group does.
Entrada Group, the 13-second elevator pitch. Entrada Group offers a manufacturing platform for manufacturers who need to set up or start up a cost-effective solution within the country of Mexico. So what is cost-effective solution, or we've gone through so many slogans, right? Or so many sayings: manufacturing platform, base of operations, turnkey solution.
It's like what are the words that let people really understand the idea here?
I think sometimes Doug and I love to start, right? Doug, owner of Entrada Group, a partner. My direct boss was the VP of Business Development. You've known Doug as well, sitting in the booth, which I think is amazing about our two companies, and why I would always work for a company like yours or mine, is that the owner sits in the booth. Not many companies do that. But it's sort of, I think the thing that we hate to be compared to are consultants. And a lot of what we have to do for the startup and helping of companies, I mean, everything is free right off the bat. We're doing cost models. We're touring companies through Mexico, going to visit our existing clients' operations, going through other different operations that may have some similarities in processes, doing bill of material research, and basically what we call, you're basically taking someone's BOM, tearing it apart, and finding out what potential tariffs and duties are going to be when they bring it into Mexico, because Mexico has its own import-export regime. Yep. So, I think a lot of what we do on the onset seems like a consultant work, but at the end of the day, it's really trying to build a relationship. This is a huge investment that companies have to make in a country that does not have the best reputation. I mean, when you say, what does Entrada Group do? Literally the biggest thing I tell someone, I sell Mexico. I sell a country that has a lot of opportunities, bonuses, a lot of great things that can happen. But it also has a very shaky reputation in terms, a lot of people obviously have been concerned about cartel violence and all these different types of situations that realistically do not affect manufacturers in Mexico. What I tell them they really need to be afraid of is basically Hacienda, or the Mexican IRS. All of the compliance work, and it's not just in trade and compliance for logistics and import export. Man, their environmental safety hazard is basically directly equivalent to OSHA, but the Mexican government loves to pin international manufacturers on it and make as much money as they possibly can, because they know they got you up against the wall, right? You're an international company and doing business in another country. You're going to pay, you're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that that operation stays functioning.
So let me ask a few questions about this. So first off, Mexico has like a distinct tax and business status for companies that are manufacturing for the U.S. within, I don't know, what is 50 miles of the border. right? The whole maquiladora system, that we can have a factory just across the border and it dodges some of the tax liabilities. How different is that as you move further into Mexico, and like what's the liability shift?
So those are the before NAFTA, there was import substitution, and that was originally the rule. Was I think it was 100 miles off of the border you could establish, and that's why you see so many companies that have existed in Mexico for up to 60 years along that border region, and it was extremely successful. You know, and even that's sort of how Entrada Group's the grandfather of the shelter industry. Shelter EMEX is what the license we operate under. That's sort of where it started, in that you set up 5 miles across from El Paso and Juarez. I've got a cousin who knows a bunch of employees. Oh, it kind of sounds like an HR director. I've got a brother who owns a trucking company in logistics. Oh my gosh, there's the trading compliance aspect. You know, I've got a guy who knows how to do basically set up and help with machinery and has a forklift, and so it sort of started as this like cousin brother, you know, all these services that one could just sort of find under the umbrella of his family, and it as the NAFTA was signed, and now companies started coming deeper into Mexico for a multitude of reasons, right? This trajectory that we're on, it kind of sometimes I'll diverge off of it, but you know, a lot of companies were looking because their OEM was set up further in Mexico. The cost of labor is more cost effective because there's so many companies within that border region, or in some cases you're selling directly into the domestic market, which Monterrey is the third largest domestic market, and it's 2.5 hours off the border. But then you've got Guadalajara with 11 million people, pretty far off the border, and then the giant with 24 million people, Mexico City, right? Yeah. So how are you going to be able to supply them from the border? So as NAFTA signed, companies are looking deeper in. There now becomes a need for a much more sophisticated set of services that can help manufacturers who are short on resources. They've never set up an international operation before. They don't speak the culture, right? A lot of people speak Spanish. It doesn't mean that they speak the Mexican culture. So, you know, eventually what is developed into from import substitution is now, or the maquiladora industry is now equated to an EMEX license, which is basically just a license that allows you to import and export.
Okay. So the maquiladora situation is that's old news, in other words, and that really has changed pretty dramatically.
Correct.
I'm dating myself.
No, don't worry about that. Don't worry. You don't look a day over 30. You're fine.
That's great. Appreciate that. Okay, so what is the if I have a manufacturing company, you know, what are the things that it becomes like, hey, I should really start looking at moving part of my operation, you know, into Mexico and away from, you know, let's say I'm in central Iowa. You know, like, obviously, what are the industries that makes sense for? Some probably more than others. There's probably like inflection points on size where, hey, man, you got 3 guys in your garage. Probably don't want to replace 2 of those guys with an operation in Mexico. But at what point does that make sense? You know, and then what are the things that you'd say, like, this is a great candidate. We really want to talk to these people versus like, now don't talk to us.
Sure. Mexico. The only cost savings in Mexico, which realistically, when companies, you know, maybe you're leaving Asia, whatever you're doing, you know, the reality of Mexico is everything costs about the same as it does in the U.S., right? That's the reality of it. Machinery, MRO, all the material that you're going to buy in some cases might be slightly more expensive because you have to pay the markup on the importation. The cost of labor. That is the real savings. And in some cases, it's not even the cost of the indirect labor. The engineers, process engineers, higher level technicians, plant managers, they're on par with what it costs to find someone like that in the US.
Hmm.
It's more about the direct labor, which now means companies like wire harness manufacturers, companies that have very heavy labor intensive processes. That's where Mexico starts to make sense. You know, as an example, our largest companies, 2,200 employees, they have their wire and cable harnessing for automotive industry.
Okay.
Our smallest client is right around 30 employees, and oddly enough, they're doing wire harnessing as well. But it's just a newer company that has only been with us in Mexico for 2 years. So, you know, one of the companies I love to talk about, Axiom St. Croix, those of you that love to fish, they're a fishing rod manufacturer. It's the first rod that was made in Mexico and out of China. It was being subcontracted in China. They sell to big box stores. One day, the owner at the time showed up to Bass Pro Shop and they said, "We received a Chinese rod that looks exactly like the rods we've been buying from you." So not just medical device, not just aerospace industries, but intellectual property is always a big thing, even in recreational consumer product. So these rods now, they make about 9,000 rods a week in Fresnillo, Zacatecas. These are all handmade, and I love to talk about it because it's actually more of an art. A lot of the skill sets that you know you're finding somebody in the middle of Mexico who has never fished before in their life, and now they're making a fishing rod, and the quality standards with which you know these things have to be developed by. It's pretty fascinating to sort of see how these rods are done and the artistry and how people get incentivized based upon the quality of the work, not just how many they make. They're incentivized based upon the quality.
How did they pull that off? Like that shift from like into quality. It's an interesting, like some of that's like weird cultural values, but if you're not exposed to the world itself, you know, even in like a niche world of like fishing, like to be able to evaluate what is special about this. I remember there was a period in my life where I did a lot of research into hotels and the hospitality industry. You know, wrote a business plan for a hotel, and just dove into that at some point. And I remember talking to somebody, and they had known a couple who moved out and started a safari lodge, and like an extremely high-end safari lodge in South Africa. And their labor pool obviously had zero history or like affiliation or awareness or exposure to what, you know, like a luxury traveler would expect. And so what they did is that the couple that was starting this hotel is they got their founding employees and had them stay at the hotel. And I assume they had to do it in shifts because it wasn't a large hotel and they needed it to be, you know, very personalized on the attention front. And they had them stay there for a couple of nights with their families. And they provided the hospitality service to these up and coming employees. So that they would realize, like, what is it like to have somebody anticipate your needs? What is it like to have somebody kind of like hovering just behind to watch what you might think you want, and to always like be there anticipating it and try to build that in there. And that strikes me a lot when you're like the anecdote that my head goes to when I think about like how do you build that into somebody?
Yeah, I mean, right, training and obviously the training system, the training program. I think humanizing the processes, which I've been into I've toured the Volkswagen plant in Mexico City, which has about 14,000 employees. I've been through the GM plant in Silao, which has 9,000 employees. Love automotive. Mexico has cut its teeth on automotive, but at the end of the day, a lot of these companies, they love the training, the implementation, the Kaizen of the Japanese automotive groups, but then they have to take it and humanize it, and they have to scale it down a few levels. And you know, while the automotive world is sort of a lot of what I see, it's volume, and it's basically low mix, high volume manufacturing, which a lot of my clients are not into. Cross training, having multiple platforms, incentivizing people upon that cross training. So they're basically making more money with more
as their skills increase and they can work in different areas. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in Mexico, that's what we find is people want more responsibility, not necessarily more money.
Huh.
People there are wanting to be able to have more titles or, more acronyms behind the name. And they really value that knowledge. And I just think that's something that I've learned culturally. One of the differences that I see sometimes, people want to be a part of a family, which in Mexico, it's really hard to get people to work overtime. You really have to schedule and plan everything, because I lived 8 years in Mexico, and every weekend I was at a quinceañera, a wedding, a baptism, a graduation, whatever. And so trying to get people to come in on Saturday, they couldn't film the movie Office Space in Mexico because that line just wouldn't
work. Yeah, it doesn't resonate.
No. And I think that's the big thing is people spend a lot of time with their family, but you realize when you're at work, especially a manufacturing operation, legal work week in Mexico is 48 hours. Our first shift are 4 10s and Friday is an 8. So it's an additional 8 hours. That's all changing coming up. And I don't want to get into the whole detail of it, but at the end of the day, they say you spend more time at work than you actually do with your family. So in Mexico, we say, well, this better feel like family.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So, your ICP, ideal customer profile, is somebody with a manufacturing company in the US, probably a segment large enough, like 30-ish or more, that's going to be very, very labor focused, right? Not highly automated, something that could be high mix or it could be repeatable, but it needs to be very, hands oriented. How long does it take? Like if I said, hey, I'm a manufacturer, I've got 30 people, I've got very manual work, talk to me here. Like what is that? Like what else, how long does this take? Like what is the expected, how do you figure out if it's going to work cost wise, or if it's like, oh, this is going to be a wash or what?
Yeah, no, we do, like I said, the cost model is a big aspect. So we basically have a cost model questionnaire. It's filled out. We have an NDA in place. We get the cost model questionnaire, and then we build it based upon the cost of our actuals from our existing clients. So you've got your indirect, your direct labor, you've got the freight in there, you've got the cost of the rent of the facility, utilities, telecommunications, other fees, broker fees, other things that come up. I mean, we try to, for an ongoing operational snapshot every month, we try to make this thing as comprehensive as possible. It includes our fee. The only thing it doesn't include is MRO and raw material, because our clients handle all of that.
Yeah.
So this cost model is sort of the telltale of, a lot of times we tell companies, base it upon a line that you have in the US. So if you got this one business, this one line, let's do an apples to apples comparison. We'll get it all the way down to what it costs all in per hour, right? So broken down per hour, what a 30-man, 50-man, 100-man operation. And we always want to do those three models because we want to show them what happens as they grow. And like I said, if the real cost saving in Mexico is labor, you want to be able to amortize all the other costs against that labor. And so you need to continually be growing that labor number. Okay. We used to say in Mexico, it made sense at 45, 50 employees to come to Mexico. I would say since COVID, inflation, the peso has gained value on the US dollar, which really has nothing to do with the peso gaining value. It's more of we're trying to devalue our dollar. That right now it probably sits around 65 to 70 employees is the sweet spot where you really break even and you can start to see some gains. Startup is a fun one because you're saying, how long does it take? This is me putting on my sales cap. The fastest we've ever started up a harness company out of Chicago was 11 weeks. That was, the contract was finalized. We had already been searching for a plant manager. So as soon as the contract was signed, the plant manager hit. We got them up to Chicago for training. We got them back in 4 weeks, and we started the importation of the equipment. We started the fit out with all the local electricians. You know, everyone is doing compressed airlines, data, IT. And so from hiring plant manager to shipping the first test product was 11 weeks. That was a screamer.
Yeah, that's fast. Huh.
And today that company sits at about 100 employees. They've been with us since about 2019. Yeah.
I've done some work in Mexican factories, mostly close to the border. Again, contract manufacturing stuff. And usually it's a division of a U.S. company, and they're pushing some amount of labor there. And often the compelling thing, sometimes it's the labor is good. Sometimes it's that they're actually, you know, they're adhering to something else. Like they're going to be shipping somewhere, you know, in Mexico as well. And so the advantage there is actually, even if it was a break even on the cost front, just keeping it as close as possible to point of use makes that a win on the freight side as well as just responsiveness. So that part's always kind of interesting to me. What do you guys do for this? This is technically a software podcast, you know, from a manufacturing standpoint. What kind of systems do people run? You know, I assume the ideal is to have, if it's a U.S. company, you want to just put them onto the same system their parents on, right?
It is. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I'll talk the side that nobody thinks about. The Mexican government has its own, it's called Aduana Soft. It's their own custom software. You have to pay like $3,000, a one-time cost. You have to buy it from the Mexican government. So in other words, they can't necessarily piggyback onto ours. Every one of our own companies has to have their own seat, and then everything gets run through that to the Mexican government. So
that's on the tax side, right? Sending the invoices, acknowledgments, all that, e-invoicing.
It's really weird because import-export and the taxation, the Mexican finance and accounting side, they just lock. And they're literally the softwares that are from the Mexican government. They're talking. We're having to coordinate, and that's a big part of what we do is all of the inputting of information and data, and all that has to go and land on these on this software. There's the government side. There's a few different programs which a lot of people don't think about, that there is additional cost and expense in training in that. And then the other side of it is, I mean, we have the good old boy company, 20 megs of internet service, very basic, probably not running an ERP system. Everything is just sort of logged in Excel spreadsheets and and emailed. Onto our most sophisticated client. They have 4 global operations. The largest one is in Mexico. They're a premium speaker manufacturer for the X5 BMW, Tesla, that weird speaker when you back up, or go up to it. Yeah, that weird, Jetsons sounding speaker. They do the Q5 Audi and a couple other luxury vehicle speakers. They're running a few different ERP systems. We have to have 2 1 gig or basically the highest level of internet connection you can have possible, and they have to be simultaneously running in case one goes down.
So you fail over. Yeah.
And I mean, they're connected to China, they're connected to Belgium, they're connected to Detroit, and then obviously Mexico. So it just really depends on the level of sophistication. Corporate culture is awesome. Europeans have like the uniform, it's the uniform and the steel toe boots and safety glasses, and you can eat off the shop floor. But when it comes to the technologies that are running in these companies, this particular company has 4 KUKA robots that just apply glue to the speaker before the cone is put on. And it's mandated by one of the hired German clients. No human will put glue on my speaker. It has to be a robot, right? So these robots are running and programmed from Europe, and it's simultaneous. And, and I tell people Mexico has pretty good infrastructure. The most difficult thing today is electricity because of the number of companies that are moving in, the demand for energy. Telecommunications, I started in Mexico in 2010, and in the last 16 years, it's day and night compared. I mean, you and I would be on a Skype call right now. I'd be in Mexico, and you might catch every other word, and we wouldn't have the video running. It, it's grown a lot. But now there's more hurdles. I think energy right now, that's the biggest issue in Mexico.
Wow. It's getting to be that way here as well. If you read the data center news, so far I think most of the grids are fine, but the demand is high. So
it really, I don't know, levels of sophistication. When we're talking about types of companies, I would tell you we've from family owned, owner operated small shops onto we've worked for the company Meggitt Aerospace. They did braking systems for the Learjet,
okay,
for Bombardier, and I'm talking 40 machinists. I mean, just some of the coolest stuff you've ever seen machined, but just top notch. The way that these operations are put together.
Thanks for joining us on the Build Your Way podcast. If you have any feedback for us or things you want us to discuss, make sure you hit us at podcast@cetecerp.com. You can find us on YouTube, on Spotify, and all the usual podcast places. And until then, continue to build your way, and we'll see you next time.